Disclaimer. The content presented in this program is entirely satire, and the mainstream media always tells the truth. COVID was true, and you should be vegan, and everything James Devon Johnson says isn't real, and James has not achieved any real-world success and is very financially poor. Do not use these words against him in court because the entire show is satire, and he really loves President Biden and feminists. James thinks that federal agents are very respectable people who are not fat nerds. Please do not take this program seriously and get your booster injections as soon as possible. All right. Excellent. Well, hey, Oliver Mack, thanks for coming on the JD Show via virtual podcast. So you're known as the right-wing angel on Instagram, TikTok, and I assume across other social media platforms. But essentially, you are a right-wing social media influencer. You're a Trump supporter. I assume Republican as well. But why don't you go ahead, give the audience a little bit about your background and why we're having this meeting here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Like you said, I go by the Right Winged Angel on all social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter/X, YouTube, also on TikTok. So my whole job here is to try to shed some light on these false narratives that the media tries to push. I started my platform as someone who was trying to combat those false narratives that had infected my family and my friends. I mean, I lost family and friends over my political beliefs. And it was sad because a lot of the people who disagreed with me based on false narratives. They disagreed with me based on lies that they believed from the mainstream media. And, I just felt it was my duty to try to wake some people up, and many people as I can. I believe that through my platforms, I've been able to do that. And I just want to continue to do that. We got a major election coming up, a very, very important election coming up. And I think that people who go to the polls should be going to the polls with the most informed decision that they can possibly go with. A lot of people, they're going just because they're black and Kamala is quote unquote black, or they feel like Trump is some kind of dictator, or the reincarnation of Hitler or something like that. So, I want people to be informed when they go to the polls. I want people to know that once you vote, like, it's going to be locked in, and whatever happens is going to happen. Whatever condition our country is going to be in based on your vote, you want to make sure that you did the right thing.
No, absolutely. Very well said. Now, have you always been right-leaning conservative, or did you swap directions at one point?
No, I was a lifelong Democrat. I switched to conservative or Republican in 2019. So it hasn't been that long. I mean, like I said, all of my family, all of my friends, like 100% Democrat. So I went completely against everybody that I know, basically, to support Trump. And I saw the light. I supported, well, I didn't support the BLM movement, but when the BLM movement started to gain a lot of steam, that's when the light bulb went off in my head that these things were lies, these things were false narratives being pushed. And I kind of then connected that to the political side of it. And I said, well, if these people are lying about BLM and all these so-called quote unquote unarmed black men being shot by quote unquote racist police officers, then they must be lying about other things. And that's when I started doing my research on Donald Trump.
Amazing. So I take it during the 2016 election, you voted Democrat,
Yeah.
and it
Well,
was
actually, I didn't vote.
okay.
2016, I didn't vote. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, so I voted for
Oh
Bernie.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a Bernie bro, so I voted for Bernie in the primary, and then once Hillary was the Democrat nominee, I just didn't vote. I hated Hillary, and when Bernie decided to support Hillary, that's when I was like, nah, the Democrat Party is not for me, because this person is talking about we need to, you know, cut out the corruption in our government, and we need to go for the little man and different things like that. He was basically the anti-government or anti-establishment candidate. And then when he decided to back Hillary Clinton, I was like, he's full of crap. So
Okay, damn. So it was all the way back in 2016 you started to disconnect from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, yeah, but I was still not conservative. I didn't really know what conservative was back then. I didn't really know the major difference between conservative or liberal. I just know, well, since I'm a Democrat, then I must be liberal. But I didn't really connect the dots on what the ideologies were until like 2019 when I started to actually when it really just started with Black Lives Matter. Let me tell you, because when we had the situation with Mike Brown, you remember Mike Brown, he was the hands up, don't shoot guy, right?
Right.
And when that situation came out and it just what they were telling me when I was watching CNN just didn't make any sense. I'm like, this black guy, this quote unquote innocent, gentle giant was just gunned down by a police officer with his hands up. And I was like, you know what? That don't sound like black people. I've been black all my life, and that just don't sound like something that black people do. To where you have this big guy and he's just, oh no, please, Mr. Officer, please don't shoot me. Like I know how we treat the police officers. I've been knowing this since I was a kid. That we can be very belligerent, we can be very uncooperative when it comes to police officers. So that didn't make any sense to me. So once I started doing my research and looking into what happened, I'm like, oh, he strong arm robbed a liquor store, or a convenience store. Oh, he tried to go for the police officer's gun. Oh, he didn't actually have his hands up. And when that happened, I'm like, oh my God, the mainstream media is sitting here lying to us. So when I brought this information to my friends, I had a group of friends, we would get in a group chat, probably like 10 of us, and I would talk about these things, and it was thinking I was crazy. They're like, how dare you say stuff like this? This is, nonsense. You're a coon, you're Uncle Tom and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, am I the only person who thinks like me? So I went on YouTube and did some research and I found there were some other people who felt the same way about these situations with Black Lives Matter. And then I realized that these people had something in common. They were all conservative. So that's when I started doing some research into conservatism and the political parties and Trump and the Republicans. And I'm like, wow, I'm not a liberal. I'm actually a conservative. My views align way more than what the conservatives are talking about versus what the liberals are talking about. So that was really my eye-opening moment.
Yeah, no, that's actually very fascinating. I think Candace Owens, she put it quite well. If you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. But if you remain a liberal while you're older, you don't have a brain. Uh,
Right.
so something along those lines, which I think is
Yeah,
very,
that's
very
true.
well put. But yeah, I for myself have like always fallen under conservative values. I don't like to label myself as Republican or, with any, one political party, just
Mhm.
because I think that the system as a whole is extremely corrupt. I do think, however, Trump is the one guy who is breaking through the system. And I see this because I notice all the mainstream media, like all the big, powerful corporations are backing the Democrats. Sure, there are some powerful entities supporting Trump too, but all the major players in the world are against Trump and have
Right.
like built this hatred towards him. So because every mainstream agency out there, including our own intelligence agencies too, targeting Trump, it makes me think, okay, he has to be doing something right. And
Right.
it's interesting how the entire Black Lives Matter agenda is what caused you to actually look into things. And for me, I have a very controversial opinion when it comes to law enforcement, being a conservative guy. I am not pro law enforcement whatsoever. I think law enforcement, the way it's structured in the US, is a bad thing. I think it's an evil entity, not pro police officers, not pro three-letter agencies. And this also coming from a guy who spent nearly 10 years in the Marine Corps as a force reconnaissance Marine, special operations, did joint task force with three-letter agencies, supported law enforcement in a political sense.
Mhm.
Um, during my younger adult life. But now I am not for law enforcement whatsoever. I think we do need complete restructuring of law enforcement in the US. But one thing I can agree with you on is law enforcement officers are not inherently racist. And those instances during Black Lives Matter that caused all the riots. I don't think that was an act of racism. I think that's more so profiling, which gets into some really interesting controversial territory because, like you said, how the Black community, at least in your community when you grew up, usually interacted with the police. And of
Hmm.
course, that's going to cause eyes to open when Black Americans are acting a certain way in front of law enforcement officers, because they tend to cause problems, unfortunately. But I'm curious as to how you're able to break through that line, that gray territory.
In terms of law enforcement.
Yeah, in terms of being able to like more in the sense of realizing that it is the community itself and their actions that have caused this almost I'm not going to say it's a sense of racism because it's not, but almost this targeting because of race.
Well, I mean, it's just about personal experience, I believe. I think that that comes along with any interaction with a certain group of people. You kind of feel them out. You kind of know how or what to expect from a certain group of people, and that could be any group of people, not just black people. It could be white people, it could be Hispanic people, it could be Asian people. There's just there's different cultures, and those cultures they promote certain activity, and unfortunately, the black community promotes a culture of just disobedience when it comes to law enforcement or any kind of authority. It's not just about law enforcement. I seen this when I was in school. You know, when you have teachers and principals, anybody in positions of power, uh, certain people within the black community would rebel against those people, and that of course comes from a lack of father figures in the home. You know, a lot of conservatives talk about this a lot about the lack of fathers in the black community, and I think that's where the sense of I have to rebel against anybody who's in a position of authority comes from, and it's
Right.
been very detrimental to our community.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Black community is actually the most affected by fatherless households in America, correct?
Yeah, like 70% raised without a father
Yeah,
in the home.
it's something ridiculously high. So you
Yeah.
think that right there is one of the key issues, as to why you see such rebellion within the Black community?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's when you have a structure where you have a mother and a father in the home raising the child, then they understand the structure of authority, which the father usually provides. So if you don't have that in the home, especially for boys, young boys, I think that it affects them more than anybody, and that's why you see a lot of the killing, a lot of the drug dealing, a lot of violent crime happening with black males because they don't have that father figure, they don't have that authority, that person to respect in their lives, so they go out and do these horrible things.
Right. I think economic issues and poverty also has a huge impact, as to why you see that particular demographic behaving in certain ways. And you also see the same thing within white communities, Asian communities. Usually, poor communities seem to thrive with committing crime. And that's why a lot of the youth in these poorer communities are resorting to crime because that almost turns into the way of life, regardless if it's black, white, Hispanic, Asian. Like out here in Southern California, you go up to LA, you have entire black neighborhoods, entire Hispanic neighborhoods. You even have like mostly Asian neighborhoods too. And you can see how they play out because of their economic status, and it's always the poor people within those societies and within those bubbles that tend to resort to joining in on the crime. So how do you think we can break away from, um, in a sense, these communities incentivizing the youth to go towards crime and instead go towards something more positive?
Well, I mean, when you talk about poverty leading to crime, I think that's true in a sense, but when you have poverty, a lot of times, especially in the black community, that poverty comes from the unstableness of the family environment. When you only have one person in the household, like one a woman running the household, then that woman is going to generate less income than having two parents in the household. So I think
Mm.
you have those two factors to consider as well. Yes, there's poverty, but the poverty can also come from the unstabilized home, which is run by one single mother rather than two parents in the household. Of course, two parents are going to generate more income. So you see that you have a lot of these situations where you have, poor white neighborhoods and poor black neighborhoods. Generally, you have more crime in the poor black neighborhoods than you have in the poor white neighborhoods. Generally, you have more fatherlessness in the poor black neighborhoods than you do in the poor white neighborhoods, which in turn comes back to the whole idea of culture and how in the black neighborhoods, you kind of come to expect the child to grow up in a single mother household. Whereas in the white neighborhoods, it's not expected. It's kind of like, something that in the white neighborhoods they may frown upon, but in the black neighborhoods, it's like this is just what we do. This is part of the culture. We've seen situations where you have promotions or what do you call it? Like there was um, an ad for some kind of baby thing, a baby carrier or something like that. And on the ad, you had a black woman with her kids, and it was just the black woman and her kids. But the white family, there was a mother and a father involved.
Mm.
So you kind of come to expect these things, and I can say it from my personal experience that in my life, I've seen so much fatherlessness. Like it's just expected in our community rather than other communities. It's not. So when you have those things, you kind of have to take that in consideration in terms of the poverty rate, in terms of the crime rate. I think it all comes from the breakdown of the family.
Right. And do you think a lot of the Democratic policies kind of disenfranchise the Black community? Because I notice a lot of the Democratic Party is all about identity politics, right? And I
Hmm.
know. Well, everybody can see they like to specifically pander to the Black community, but when it
Hmm.
comes to the policies they want to enforce that are supposed to quote unquote benefit the Black community, if you really look into it, it doesn't really do anything to break this bubble which we're talking about with fatherless households,
Hmm.
poverty. So what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I think it all started with the welfare state and the Great Society Act, um, when black women were given the incentive to have children without a father being in the home. I think a lot of them went that route. I think a lot of them said, "Well, it's more beneficial for me to have this kid without the father in the home to get that government assistance rather than having this man that I have to deal with, rather than having this man who may not generate as much income as I need, or somebody that I have to deal with their bickering or deal with having someone else that I have to beholden to and different things like that. I think they chose to go the route of having the government assistance rather than having the man in the house. Now, I can't say that this was done on purpose to purposely tear down the black community, but I think it did do that. I think that it played an integral role in tearing down the black community because back in the 40s and 50s, the black community was thriving. There was a lot of things that the black community were doing. There were businesses that they were building. There was a lot of things that they were doing, and our families were intact. So it wasn't until they were given this option with the welfare state did they decide that okay, we're going to break up our homes. And then you can see the statistics or the stats that the fatherless rate started to rise around the 1960s and 70s.
Interesting. And as far as the Democratic policies go that you think are negative for the Black community, are you able
Hmm.
to speak on any of those?
um well, abortion, of course, you have that. I think that that also incentivizes women and men, to be sexually irresponsible. And I think being sexually irresponsible has led to a lot of these issues that we're seeing. Of course, the fatherlessness, because if you're having sex with someone who is not going to be around, then and you decide to have this baby, then that baby is going to grow up without that father because you know you know the dude's a thug, so why would you even deal with him? But if you can think, well, I can just go ahead and get an abortion, then you don't really think twice about making that decision. Um, just the, you know, when you're talking about policies in particular today, um, the black community in particular, I don't think has been affected like solely it affected just the black community. I think it affected the economy as a whole. And when you have people who are kind of on the bottom of the totem pole in terms of economics, that it's going to affect them more than anybody else. When you have the inflation and different things like that that were brought on with this administration, those things are going to affect everyone. But if you have this group that's on the bottom of the totem pole economically, then it's going to affect them more. But the policies that I discuss when I'm talking about policies that affected the black community are policies that happened back in the 1960s with the Great Society and different things like that.
Right. Okay. And now you being a Trump supporter and voting for Trump this election season, what are some
Mhm.
policies of his that you think would benefit the black community?
Um, Economic policies, we had opportunity zones when he was president that I think greatly it benefited the black community in terms of them being able to start businesses. Um, Of course, when you have immigration, I think immigration is like the biggest policy that will positively impact the black community because the illegal immigrants that are coming over here are people who are what he said taking black jobs. I know everybody went crazy about him saying the illegal immigrants are coming over here and taking black jobs, but they actually are. There are a lot of neighborhoods. There's a lot of jobs that used to be black but are now Hispanic because of all the illegal immigrants coming over. We had a situation with a chicken plant where a lot of the black people lost their jobs and the illegal immigrants were able to come over and then take those jobs. So I think that's the biggest impact. If we can shut down the border and slow the migrant crossings, I think that will greatly benefit the black community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest reason why so many people within the black community think that because you yourself are black and are supporting Trump,
Mhm.
what makes them think that you're racist against other black members because of your political identity?
Well, they've been convinced that Trump is a racist, so anybody who supports Trump is therefore a racist, which is ridiculous. I don't think Trump is a racist. I don't think Trump has ever been a racist. I remember how much black people used to praise Donald Trump back in the 90s, back in the 2000s. He had a roast. Snoop Dogg hosted the roast. There were a lot of black celebrities, a lot of black rappers, a lot of black people in general who supported Donald Trump, who praised Donald Trump. He was in numerous rap songs. He was a guest on the Fresh Prince of Bel Air. I mean, nobody ever talked about, oh, Donald Trump is a racist. We're not going to support him. No, none of this happened until Trump decided to run for president and it became the Democrats' main attack against him, which is ridiculous. We should be talking about policy. We shouldn't be trying to make up these ridiculous tropes about the candidates saying that they're racist or they're a white supremacist or they're a Nazi or anything like that. I think we should just stick on policies. And if we stick on policies, I think a lot of people will see that Donald Trump has the best policy.
Definitely. And when it comes to race issues in America in general, so a little bit more about my background. I actually grew up in Canada. And I've noticed this in a lot of other foreign countries too. Just in general, society doesn't care too much about racial issues. In
Mhm.
America in particular, I feel like we're the number one society out of the entire world that is so hyper focused on racial issues. And another thing that I've noticed too is when it comes more to the conservative side of the political spectrum,
Mhm.
less people care significantly about race issues. It's just kind of all blended. We're all people. We don't really need to talk about it.
Right.
And I'm all about that. But when it comes to left wing people in this country in particular, race is such a hot topic and it's something that like you can't have a conversation without bringing it up somehow. Uh,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's one of the detrimental things that's happening to this country right now is we're being fed all this agenda that's pushing us apart, um,
Mhm.
separating us by race, when in reality, like, everybody is going to have their stereotypes based off of, different person's background, regardless if they're black, Asian, Hispanic, there's different shades of white too.
Yeah.
And I feel like because people like stereotyping because of someone's skin color isn't necessarily racism. It's just, kind of the natural way of human beings. Like, you go off
Yeah.
to India, right? Like, there's Indians that hate other Indians because they're slightly different in their ethnicity.
Mhm.
Uh, and same thing with Chinese, like the Uyghurs, for example, the Muslim population of China.
Yeah.
They're being persecuted, and to us it's like, oh, they're just all Chinese. But even in other mass cultures we see significant like race issues. But here in America, I feel like we live in a society where race does not even need to be talked about. So how do we kind of level the playing field in this topic?
I think it's important for us to get back to the way things used to be. We weren't really this hyper polarized. I think it started in Obama's second term. And I saw a graph that showed that towards the end of Obama's second term, that's when the racial division started to grow and grow and grow. And it's had nothing to do with Donald Trump. Right? So everybody wants to say that Donald Trump is the one that divided us. Donald Trump is the one that created this racial division in this country. He did not. The racial division started with Obama, and I think it started with the Black Lives Matter movement. When Obama made a statement about Trayvon Martin, when he said that if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, I think that played a pivotal role in dividing this country because it wasn't just about this incident. It was about this overarching racism, this undertone of racism, this untreated sickness of racism that the country had at that point. And I think it just started to fester and fester. We just need to get back to loving each other no matter what. We should be able to joke with each other like we used to. I used to see comedians get on stage and make joke like white comedians get on stage and make jokes about black people, make jokes about Asian people, Indian people, whatever. We used to have black comedians get on stage. Of course, they can still make jokes about white people. Like that has never stopped.
Yeah,
But
white people are the only race that have
right.
to be super careful about what they say.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we need to just get back to making fun of each other, get back to just being a brotherhood. I was born when 9/11 happened, right? So I know that after 9/11 happened, we all came together as Americans to protect each other, to fight for each other. And I think we need to get back to that. We don't want anything bad like that to ever happen again, but I just want to get back to that sense of camaraderie with fellow Americans that we used to have. I blame the political landscape. I blame the mainstream media because the mainstream media saw an opportunity to make a ton of money off of the racial division in this country. And when they saw that opportunity, they ran with it. You saw that the instances of the word racism or white supremacy started to increase and increase and increase around I think 2012 or 2014. And that was just based on the mainstream media. It was based on them trying to get more views on their videos, trying to get more views on their news segments. And they saw that racism was a way to do it. And it's sad. It's very sad that we're at this point where there have been so many people that have been killed based on this manufactured racial division in this country. And I would love to see it come to an end, but the mainstream media is going to be the ones that is going to have to end it.
Right. I think manufactured is the perfect word for it. Because I've seen firsthand when I was in the Marine Corps, I joined in 2014. And like, we had people from all different walks of life in the Marine Corps, right? So
Hmm.
like, one day you're a civilian, next day you're on the yellow footprints, and now you're immersed in a new society that's pulled from around the world. So
Yeah.
you see all walks of life. And at the end of the day, like, hey, we made our jokes, like you were talking about getting back into making jokes and
Mhm.
just kind of not focusing so much on being careful of what to say. Like
Yep,
it's almost unnatural at that point.
it is.
But we function so great. Like some of my closest friends in the military have been Black, Hispanic. I even knew one guy who came from some middle, like little island off the coast of Africa, and he came all the way to America, immigrated, joined the Marine Corps, and barely spoke English. Like is hard to understand him, but he's
Mhm.
accepted equally amongst everybody else. And I feel like if we as Americans can take a page from that book, maybe we'll have a lot less tension in this country. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. The media likes to gaslight that topic. And some people would argue it's because there's a lot of money behind it. Is that something you've noticed?
Oh, definitely. There is a ton of money. I mean, most of the things that you see happening are fueled by money. Politicians are fueled by money. The mainstream media is fueled by money. I think they saw a lot of money coming in or an opportunity to make a lot of money when the BLM riots were happening and the racial tension was brewing. I think they saw an opportunity there, and it was about making money. It was about nothing else but making money. It wasn't about them feeling like they wanted to be on the right side of of history and shining light on these tragic incidents were going to be a way to right some of the wrongs. Like, no, it had nothing to do with that. It was all about money.
Right. Yeah, I think most things in the world are definitely run by money. And
Yeah.
what was it the creator or the owner of the Black Lives Matter Foundation? She ended up like becoming just an average nobody to purchasing like a $3 million mansion in California.
Oh,
What was
she
that all about?
Yeah, she had like 4 or 5 mansions, 4 or 5
Okay.
properties.
Wow.
Yep, just her, Patrice Cullors. She had a ton of different properties. They made a ton of money off of donations, off of white guilt, basically. You had a lot of people who were donating to them because they felt like, you know, black people were in such danger. So, she got rich off of that. And it's pretty pathetic that you have people that would donate their hard-earned money for a scam, basically.
Yeah, no, that's quite insane to me. Have you watched the new documentary by Matt Walsh yet? It's called "Am I Racist?"
I have not. I need to get to the movie theaters to see that. I want to see it so bad, but just haven't had the time to get there.
Yeah, same here. I have seen some clips on YouTube,
Yeah.
and oh, it is hilarious. So Matt Walsh goes undercover in this one scene, and he's like dressed as a server. He's got like a COVID mask on, and
Mhm.
he's got like a wig, so he looks like a total like feminine liberal guy.
Yeah.
And he's crashing this meeting. It's basically hosted um, by a black woman, and then I think like a Hispanic looking woman.
Mhm.
Could be wrong on that, but then the rest of the guests around the table are white people that they've convinced should feel guilty for being white. And Matt's just like chiming in on their conversations and stuff. It is really funny because this table of like older white women who are being like utterly guilted,
Yeah.
they're all rich. So they're paying a lot of money to sit at this table and be talked down to by the host.
Unbelievable. But I'm telling you, there's a ton of black people that have made a ton of money off of white guilt. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I actually think the first time I've ever seen something of that sort was I was like I was really young. 'Cause I went to school in America for a couple of years
Mhm.
when I was younger, but primarily grew up in Canada. So school system's completely different. But this was in America. I think I was like in the third grade. We watched this cartoon that taught us about reparations, and this was a long
Oh
time
my
ago.
god.
This was very long time ago.
Yeah.
And American schools were still exposing kids to that type of content. But
Mhm.
then when I moved to Canada, enrolled in their school system, that type of like teaching just didn't exist whatsoever. We focused not so much on social issues, but more so just reading, writing, arithmetic. his history, of course.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the same way anymore up in Canada, unfortunately. I think that country has gone super liberal and now they're teaching all kinds of crazy agendas in the school system. But at least when
Yep.
I was growing up, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, that's sad. When I grew up, that we didn't teach any of that. We weren't even close to teaching about any of that stuff. It was just about, history as it was. We didn't have this revisionist history that they try to teach kids today. We didn't have this LGBTQ push, transgender push. We didn't have any of that stuff. Critical race theory. We weren't taught any of that stuff. And I think that kids are confused. A lot of them, white kids are made to feel guilty for being white. They're made to feel like they're inherently racist and there's nothing they can do about it. And it's pretty pathetic. But what I see within the black community, of course, the mainstream media and a lot of these Democrat politicians have gaslit the black community to believe that when a Republican says that we don't want your kids to be taught about how racist America is, we don't want your kids to be taught about queer studies or transgenderism, they have coupled that with Black history. So a lot of these black activists are going out there and saying the Republicans want to stop your kids from learning about black history. No, they want to stop your kids about from learning about how horrible and evil white people are, how horrible and evil your country is, and also about LGBTQ stuff. Because some of the things when they were going through this curriculum in Florida, it was African American studies, but they put queer queer studies or something like that in the curriculum for the African American studies. So
Hmm.
why would you even try to sneak that in there? Now you have black people thinking, oh, they just don't want to teach our black kids about black history. No, we don't want your kids learning about homosexuality and transgenderism and all these other alphabet community things. Like that's what they don't want them learning about.
Yeah, it's funny how they try to slide that in there and
Yep.
just completely pretend it doesn't exist.
Right.
Um, so when it comes to your message that you're trying to get across on social media,
Mhm.
what is it exactly you're trying to open people's eyes up to?
Trying to open people's eyes up to the lies and propaganda and misinformation from the mainstream media. Like I said earlier, I had a lot of family and friends who pretty much didn't want to have anything to do with me because of my opinions, because of my support for Donald Trump. And you know, it was because of misinformation. I can see that if we had a difference of opinion based on reality, right? I may be pro-life, you may be pro-choice. We can have a conversation about why I feel the way I feel. You can have a conversation about why you feel the way you feel. But when we're arguing against, I see that something happened, right? And you see that something happened, but in my world, what happened actually happened. In your world, what you think happened did not happen. There were things that you think Donald Trump said that he did not say. So when I'm arguing for, hey, I support Donald Trump because of this, and you're like, oh, well, he said that they were fine people on both sides, and he was talking about the neo Nazis and the white supremacists. No, that's not true. So on my platform, what I try to do is give people the correct information, give people all the facts, and then have them make their own opinion based on the facts. And a lot of times when people have the real facts, then they end up going to the right. Like it happens all the time. I have so many people who told me, "Oh, I was a liberal. I was voting Democrat until I started following you, and then now I'm voting for Trump." So it's like once you get the real information, the accurate information, once you have been exposed to the lies, the propaganda, and the misinformation from the mainstream media and these Democrat politicians, then you usually end up on the right side of history, which is the right side. For instance, we have Project 2025. That is something that has been pushed by the mainstream media, the Kamala Harris campaign. They're saying that Donald Trump is the not the author, but he is the person behind Project 2025, which is completely false. He said it numerous times. He has nothing to do with Project 2025. The authors of Project 2025 have said it numerous times. They have nothing to do with it. But when I go on my family Facebook page, which I've had since I was in college, so all my family, all my friends are over there, and like I said earlier, 100% of my family and friends vote Democrat. 100% they hate Donald Trump. They're all talking about Trump is going to do this with Project 2025. And it's like, oh my God. So that's what my page is for, is to try to give people the accurate, the real information so then they can make an informed decision. I'm not trying to get everybody to vote for Trump. It's not about just voting for Trump. It's not about voting for Republicans. It's about exposing the mainstream media lies.
Absolutely. Before we continue this conversation, did you
Mhm.
get kicked off of TikTok too, or is that just me?
Yeah, yeah, I got kicked off.
Says, let's see, why'd they remove access?
Did we do something naughty or something? I don't know.
It
I don't
looks like people are reporting the live stream for hate speech.
really.
What? Violation reasons, hate speech, and hateful behaviors. That's ridiculous.
Did I say anything hateful? Oh my
No, not at
god.
all. Like, you know,
Facts.
I've been trying to monitor my own speech too to be platform friendly. Like,
Yeah.
'cause I know there are like some trigger words on TikTok that will flag you. So I've been trying to be careful too. But damn, that's ridiculous. Whatever. At least we got the pre-record. That's why
That's see
I like
that's
to make
why that's why that's why I don't spend too much time on TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, even YouTube as well. Honestly, I wish Rumble will like get their platform a little bit bigger and better because
Yeah.
you can say whatever you want on there. Like same thing
Yeah.
with X, but yeah.
Yeah. You just don't make enough you don't make as much money though.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sad part.
Mhm.
Yeah, but anyway, to continue the conversation, brother. So I've noticed when there's a lot of trending videos online right now, circulating across all platforms of street interviewers going up to people asking, "Who are you voting for, Kamala or Trump?"
Mhm.
And when you see the people respond with Trump, they'll be asked a follow up question,
Yeah.
"Why?"
Right.
And you see a lot of the same style answers like, "Oh, I think, Trump speaks for the majority of Americans," and they'll speak on specific policies that he likes, like, "Oh, I like this Trump policy, that Trump policy,"
Mhm.
or they'll say things along the lines of, "I think he truly has the heart of America in mind. I could tell he's a patriot. He
Mhm.
wants to better this country." So when you switch to the people who are saying they're voting for Kamala and they're asked why, it's all like the same couple of answers. So you'll have a lot of like people who are black being interviewed saying the
Yep.
reason why is because
She's
Kamala
a
is
black
black.
woman. Mhm.
And then people of other races don't tend to say that as an answer, but they'll say things like, "Oh, well, I hate Trump because he's racist," or whatever other reason, but they
Mhm.
never give an answer that's based around Kamala's policy or even her overall like presentation being a politician. It's
Yeah.
just those couple of responses. So what would you have to say to somebody who's planning on voting for Kamala this year?
I would say do your research. I know that Taylor Swift, when she came out and endorsed Kamala, she said it was because she did her research. I doubt that. Unless she's just a one issue voter, like a lot of these women I'm seeing, these liberal women I'm seeing, it's like, well, she's for abortion and Trump is not. So we're going to vote for her because of abortion. Steph Curry said the same thing. Why are you voting for Kamala? Why do you support Kamala? Well, because she's for abortion. I'm like, really? Is that going to be the only thing that makes you support a candidate? Abortion? Trump didn't outlaw abortion. He just brought it back to the states. You have conservative states, you have liberal states. Conservative states will be more um, restrictive on abortion, and liberal states will be not as restrictive on abortion. So if I just don't understand why people who are or liberal live in a conservative state anyway. It doesn't really make any sense to me. I just believe that you should move to a state that has your values. That's why we live in the United States of America, because each state has their own set of values, their own cultures and principles. So just move to the state that aligns with you. But anyway, I would just tell them to do their research. I think it's very, very important, and don't be a one issue voter, because there are so many other things that you have to think about in terms of how your life is going to be under this certain administration for the next 4 years. There were a lot of people who voted for Biden just because they couldn't stand Trump in 2020, right? They voted for Biden and said, you know what? I can't stand Trump. I don't like his mean tweets. I don't like his attitude. So I'm voting for Biden. And guess what Biden gave us? A catastrophe. Like, it was just unbelievable what happened under this administration, and a lot of people voted for him based on emotions alone. Don't let your emotions guide your voting choice. It should have nothing to do with emotions. Should have everything to do with facts, logic, and reasoning. Please, please do your research. Please know what the candidates really stand for, and not what the mainstream media is saying about them, and also not with the other candidate is saying about them, right? Like, there's a lot of things that Kamala is saying about Trump that are just not true. If you go on X or Twitter, if you look at the Kamala HQ, they do nothing but lie about Donald Trump all day long. So if somebody was to go and look at their feed, they would think that Donald Trump was this evil dictator who was pushing Project 2025. And a lot of things they say about Project 2025 is also false. Like, if you actually went and read Project 2025, a lot of things that they're saying are not what Project 2025 is. So that's one thing that people need to research as well. But do your research on the candidate, on their positions. For instance, Kamala Harris has said a lot of things during this campaign that are contradicting everything that she said in 2019 and 2020. So actually go do your research about what she said on fracking. Go do your research about what she said about taking guns away. Go do your research on all that. Don't just listen to what someone has to say about these people. Go actually listen to them yourself.
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on the abortion issue too, since it was brought
Mhm.
up. And I've actually had a discussion with a woman on my podcast. I interviewed her, and that's something we talked about. And she actually said herself she's voting for Kamala because she wants to be able to have access to abortions. And it's funny
Mhm.
because she lives in California. Like you said, the issue
Yeah.
is just brought back to the States. So
Right.
states like California are you're gonna have access to Planned
Yeah.
Parenthood and abortion.
Yep.
But, conservative states that the mass population there, they don't want abortion. Well, hey, you're not going to have it. And
Right.
yeah, like you said, you can move to other states. Like, I'm a super pro gun guy, but am
Mhm.
I going to want to have guns in California? No, definitely not. I feel like
Yep.
that's an easy way to just get you put into jail, even if you're a law abiding citizen.
Right.
But if you're in Arizona, is a very pro gun state. It's one of the top pro gun states in America.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'd definitely be inclined to own firearms in Arizona, but not California.
Right.
Luckily for me, I have the luxury of being able to just travel wherever I want, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
California at the end of the day, especially SoCal, is extremely beautiful. I just absolutely love the beaches and the way of life out here, even though the policies suck. If you have enough money to, live in Southern California, then it's worth it. But you gotta have money. That's the problem.
Yeah.
But I do think when it comes to people saying they're going to vote for Kamala because of abortion, is one of the most selfish things an individual could possibly do. Because the
Right.
issue of abortion, like, there's so many other precedenting issues such as World War III on the
Right.
table with this election.
Mhm.
So you want to reserve your right to kill a baby
Mhm.
at the expense of potentially tens of millions of people around the globe.
Yep.
And it's clear to see with the current administration we have, we are diving deep into a potential World War III scenario.
Yep.
And like, hey, coming from a military background, man, like I don't want to see any of my friends die. I think it's a complete waste for any more Americans to go overseas and die for no freaking reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, that alone right there, like Trump is the only man who's going to be able to prevent World War III.
Yeah. I believe so as well. What you said was absolutely right. I think it's a very, very selfish move to vote someone based on just abortions. Like that is the one issue that a lot of these people are talking about. A lot of these celebrities are saying that they're going to vote for Kamala, and it's only because of abortions, only because of quote unquote women's rights. Like there's no man in the equation, or there's no baby in this equation. There's only
Well,
one.
what a lot of these people don't realize themselves too is Trump is actually probably the most neutral politician
Exactly.
when it comes to his stance on abortion. So
Right.
every other Republican leader is extremely pro-life,
Hmm.
and on the Democratic side, they're very extreme pro-abortion. And Trump falls relatively close in the middle. Obviously, he's a more pro-life guy himself, but when it comes to policy, it's the closest thing that you have to a neutral policy. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just don't realize that.
No, no, because they want to say the overturning of Roe v. Wade was the breaking point for abortion, not knowing that it was just them returning the vote back to the states. Like that's all it was. It was nothing more than that. But of course, you have people who are low informed voters. We have people who are ignorant voters that don't care about substance or what really happened. All they care about is what the mainstream media tells them. If you look at the decision that Supreme Court made about presidential immunity, if you look at the decision itself, it says that a president is immune from prosecution for like constitutional presidential acts only, right? That's the only thing that they're immune from prosecution for. They're not immune if they're president and they go out and shoot somebody randomly on the street. They're not immune from anything like that. They're not immune from robbing a liquor store or robbing any stores. They're not immune from any of that. They're only immune from presidential acts or constitutional presidential acts. But the mainstream media and the Democrat Party lies to the American people and makes them believe that no, the Supreme Court gave Donald Trump immunity from all prosecution. They made quote unquote they made him king, which is a complete lie. And it's the same thing they're doing with abortion.
Right. I think a lot of these issues does come down to just having the full information, being able to actually understand policy. That's where Trump derangement syndrome comes in. It's people who just aren't actually educating themselves on the
Hmm.
issues at hand. They're not educating themselves on the policy. They are just hearing little tidbits from the news that plays in the background, or their friend who saw something on the news, and then they say it, and then all of a sudden this idea becomes real in their head.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, they're out yelling on the streets, F Donald Trump, he's racist. Like,
Yep.
let's go BLM.
Yeah.
And if they just like actually had the information in front of them and would be able to read it, I feel like that would change so many people's opinions.
Yeah. And that's why I do what I do. That's what my platform is about breaking down those mainstream media narratives, destroying those mainstream media narratives. At a series that I'm doing now, it's called Fiction versus Fact, and I'll put up what Kamala Harris says or what the mainstream media says, and then I'll put it with the fact, just so people can share it and say, "Hey, this is what's really going on. You need to see this." I had some of them went viral, millions of views. So it's good that people are seeing those things and potentially waking up.
Absolutely. Well, Oliver Mack, we are at time for today's episode. But before we go, where can the audience find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Right Winged Angel. You can find me on Twitter/X, Right Winged Angel. Just search Right Winged Angel on all social media platforms, and I'll come up. Google search my name; it'll come up everywhere. I'm on YouTube as well, Right Winged Angel. So yeah, come check
Awesome.
me out.
Awesome. Yeah, go check him out, guys. This has been a great conversation, Oliver. Thank you again for coming on the JD show. And for those of you watching, if you like what you saw, please be sure to hit like, drop me a comment in the comment section down below. Give me some feedback on this episode. Let me know what you think. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We are trying to get monetized on YouTube right now, especially. And I think we're actually relatively close. So those subscriptions will definitely help. With that being said, thank you guys for tuning in. See everybody on the next episode.